unflinching and brave in making sure America saw what she saw. Ida B. Wells once said, and I quote, "The way to right wrongs is to turn the light of truth upon the wrongs."
Turning the light of truth upon the wrongs. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580, and we don't black down.
4 members of the Proud Boys, including their former leader, Enrique Tarrio, were convicted on today. Actually, this happened today. They were convicted of seditious conspiracy for plotting to keep President Donald J. Trump in power after his election defeat by leading a violent mob and attacking the Capitol on January 6, 2021. The jurors in the case failed to reach a decision on the sedition charge for one of the defendants, although he too was convicted of other serious felonies. All of the defendants were convicted of conspiracy, which carries up to 50 years in prison. The verdicts, coming after 7 days of deliberations in federal district court in Washington, were a major blow against one of the country's most notorious far-right groups and another milestone in the Justice Department's vast investigation of the Capitol attack. Lawmakers don't have many workdays left to strike a debt ceiling deal. The government could run out of money to pay its bills as early as June 1st. Congress and President Biden are scheduled to be in D.C. together just 6 days this month. If Congress doesn't raise or suspend the debt ceiling in time, it could wipe out millions of jobs. New York became the first state to ban gas stoves in new buildings. The law requires all electric heating and cooking in buildings shorter than 7 stories by 2026 and in taller buildings by 2029. This is considered a big win for climate activists. The same Texas billionaire who treated Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas to lavish vacations, paid private boarding school tuition for Thomas's grandnephew, a boy the justice has said he raised as a son. Now, this is according to new reporting from ProPublica. They also are reporting that Harlan Crow, a prominent Republican donor, paid tuition at Hidden Lake Academy, a boarding school in Georgia, as well as at Randolph-Macon Academy in Virginia. And this was all tuition paid for Mark Martin, Clarence Thomas's grandnephew, a boy that he had legal custody of. And there's also a new report out from the Washington Post that Jenny Thomas was paid tens of thousands of dollars in consulting fees. However, the billing for those fees, she told the folks, keep my name off of it. So she didn't want her affiliation with the billing to be known to the public. There's so much information coming out currently about Clarence and Jenny Thomas and their finances, and it doesn't look good. Buckingham Palace confirms that Prince Harry and Prince Andrew will attend the coronation of King Charles III and Queen Camilla, but they will play no role in the ceremony. It's said that they will be seen but not heard. Charles's step-grandsons will have more duties to perform than his estranged son and disgraced brother. Harry and Andrew will sit in the congregation on Saturday at Westminster Abbey, the scene of every coronation since 1066. They'll be sitting there as members of the British royal family. Missy Elliott and Willie Nelson were voted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Yesterday's announcement was a milestone. Elliott will be the first female rapper inducted. Country music legend Willie Nelson just turned 90 years young. Other honorees include Kate Bush, Sheryl Crow, and Rage Against the Machine. The induction ceremony is November 3rd of this year. Well, this is Areva Martin in real time, and I'm your host, Areva Martin. This is your one-stop destination for today's trending news, expert analysis, and my unfiltered opinions. This is hour 2 of the show, and I'm so happy I'm going to be sitting down going one-on-one with Alex Renton. Alex is a journalist. He's also the author of several books, including Blood Legacy, Reckoning with a Family's History of Slavery. Alex just wrote an article for The Guardian that details Britain's benefiting from industrialized slavery in the Caribbean. The article talks about the vast and many-stranded enterprise that was responsible for 11% of the British gross domestic product at its height in the 1800s. The article says wealth and privilege seeps down the generations, and British slavery ended only 185 years ago. There must be hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Britons whose lives are touched by the money it generated. That's according to a new article out in The Guardian, written by Alex Renton. When we come forward, Alex is going to break down what he is doing to make Britain and other nations around the globe atone for their involvement in the transatlantic slave trade. Stay with us. KBLA Talk 1580.
She's the real deal in real time. You're listening to Areva Martin in real time on KBLA Talk 1580.
Thanks to our new sponsor, Lendistry. Lendistry is a national Black-led small business lender that is headquartered in Los Angeles. Lendistry helps small business owners access the affordable capital needed to grow. Visit Lendistry, LENDISTRY.com/KBLA today.
Life is uncertain. It's okay to feel stressed, anxious, worried, or frustrated. It's normal. With CalHope's free and secure mental health resources, it's easy to get the help you and your loved ones need when you need it the most. Call our warm line at 833-317-4673 or live chat at calhope.org today.
As a dentist, I know what my patients are saying when they really can't speak. She says her gums have been bleeding. Is there anything you can do? Absolutely. You can try New Crest Gum Detoxify and Restore. Yup, New Crest Gum Detoxify and Restore is professionally designed to start healing gums from day one. Right. Healthy gums, healthy mouth.
Crest Gum Detoxify and Restore. Smile, Crest has you covered.
Whether you own a local business or a global one, you're always looking for ways to position your operation to create opportunities and move on them faster. With Bank of America, you get access to experts, award-winning insights, and business solutions so powerful, you'll make every move matter, locally and globally. Visit bankofamerica.com/banking for business to learn more. What would you like the power to do? Copyright 2023 Bank of America, N.A.
KBLA Talk 1580 is in the lab right now, prepping some new shows coming your way soon. More empowerment, more inspiration, more entertainment.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Jazz Urban Hour. I'm your host, Bill Banfield. We are a curated musical show that highlights contemporary cultural issues and artistry, showcasing music as a relevant and necessary arm of contemporary cultural identity.
You must learn.
Welcome. I am your host, Dr. Tyrone Howard on KBLA Talk 1580, and you're listening to You Must Learn, where we talk about education as a tool for transformation. Education in our homes, in our schools, and in our communities. Education for transformation is the tagline, and we are here to talk about why we must learn.
KBLA Talk 1580 is for discerning listeners just like you. So tell all your friends you've discovered the talk station curating smart content for smart people. We're KBLA Talk 1580, and we've got you black. There's no time like the present. Let's get back to more of Areva Martin in real time on KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm back with Alex Renton. He's a journalist and author of a book about reparations and slavery in the UK. And I wrote a really interesting opinion piece for The Guardian that caught my attention. I just want to read a paragraph from your piece, Alex. It says, there are many records from the 1830s that show that 46,000 individuals, including two of my 3 times great-grandfathers, received British governmental compensation for giving up their slaves at abolition, which was completed in 1838. Some put the money into land or into shares in railroads and the other tech startups of the British Industrial Revolution. That huge injection of cash seeded new fortunes. Some of those families remain among the richest and most powerful in our country today. that is such a honest and telling revelation, Alex. Let's start with, why are you on this mission to reveal and expose those folks who benefited from slavery in the UK?
Good afternoon, Areva. I think the simple answer to that is because, as I see it, as most people see it, slavery that Britain practiced in the Caribbean for 250 years still affects not just Caribbean countries, but our country, Britain today. We're not unlike America. The descendants of the people we enslaved by force and murdered are often among the poorest and least advantaged people. We have systemic racism in our country, and we have street level racism in our country. And it's clear that you can't write this off as history if it's still affecting how people's lives are lived now. So I thought you had to look at it, and it was important. And friends of mine who are of color say that white people like me deny it, write it off as something that happened, should be got over, should be forgotten about. Whereas actually acknowledgement and apology are a really important part of repairing that damage.
What got you interested in this work? Because, as you said, a lot of folks want to forget about this. They want to act like slavery never happened. They want to just wipe it out of our history books, wipe it out of our memories. What got you so interested in this?
Well, I mean, I'm a writer, an investigative journalist, and I was literally my grandmother's house. This is about 6 years ago. I was down. It's a grand old house, a classic British house in the countryside in Scotland. And I was going through some old papers. I found these boxes and boxes of old family papers, and I was actually looking for something else. And they'd all been catalogued by my grandfather, who died in the 1970s. And I kept coming across the words in them, Tobago and Jamaica. And I said to my mother, "What is this? And she said, "Well, yeah, a bit embarrassing that." And she said, "My daddy told me that, yeah, we were involved in slavery, like everyone else," in quotes, meaning like everyone else in the 18th century who was rich and powerful, but we didn't make much money, and so you shouldn't feel too embarrassed about it. It didn't go on for long. And I thought, I'm a journalist, and that's like waving a red rag. I had to get in there and start reading these old papers, and I found the extent of it, which it went on a long time. And we were enslaved, my family and their partners personally, some 900 African people and their descendants, and we made a lot of money. Let me stop you, Alex.
I'm just kind of taken aback by the comment. You said this was your mother, right? That you're having this conversation with?
This is with my mother.
Yes. So your mother said, don't get too bent out of shape, because we weren't involved in it too long, and we didn't make a lot of money.
Well, that's what her father said to her. My grandfather said.
Oh, that's what so the grandfather, that was his justification. That's just such a, those statements.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, there's so much packed in there to say, oh, well, don't worry, because we didn't have too many of them and we didn't make a lot of money, as if that made it okay, right?
Yeah, I mean, he was a decent man, my grandfather, and but I think he was very torn. I think he was, we British are brought up to worship our ancestors, to think that we had, they were the best people ever, and to also to believe our empire was the best empire, But so I think, the British were very good generally at hailing the fact that Britain abolished slavery quite earlier than the United States, of course, and somehow seeing us as the good guys of the African transatlantic slavery story. And that was really what he was reflecting. But we're not the good guys. Britain transported more Africans across the Atlantic than any other country except for Portugal. And that's because of Brazil. I mean, we were absolutely the bad guys. And it was really, it helped build modern Britain, the enslavement of African people. The money generated from it was absolutely enormous as the modern age was beginning. But I think, my grandfather didn't want my mother to worry too much, to be upset about this. I mean, he was doing a father's job, but he was lying to her. He was lying to her.
He lied because you said, as you started to investigate, your family held 900 individuals in slavery?
Yeah, I mean, a few specifics. So basically, they bought land and African people in Tobago and in Jamaica in about 1770, and they held the Jamaican plantation. If you've got any listeners who know Jamaica, was in St. Thomas in the East Parish, about an hour east of Kingston, and Roselle, it's called. The place is there. I've been there, and they held that land until 1875. Now, British slavery in the Caribbean was abolished in 1835, but they had 65 years right at the top of the trade, when they were making so much money from sugar that and the selling of African people and the related industries, that Britain was becoming the world's top economic power.
Okay, so you find these papers, you have that conversation with your mom, and then you go on a journey to investigate this further, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
And what else did you learn about not only your family's history, but the history of Britain as it relates to, how it profited from the slave trade, particularly in the Caribbeans?
That's right, Areva. I mean, I think, I'm an upper class British person. I had a very expensive education. I went to Eton, the Royal School, but I was taught propaganda like North Korea. I just was not taught about, this really important chapter, ugly chapter in my, I knew more about slavery in America because I watched Roots and things when I was a teenager. I didn't know about us. All I knew is that
how do the Brits teach about their involvement in slavery? Because we're going through in this country right now an effort by some Republican governors and Republican states to whitewash the history of slavery in America.
Yeah,
and it sounds like what you're saying is that was done decades ago in the UK.
I mean, there's a lot of the problems about this war about history and cultures, are being reflected sadly in Britain as well. We're going through it too. But it's kind of interesting because we were never taught about it. I think I learned more about slavery from Bob Marley than I did from my history teachers, and I took history, my daughter, who's 18, has just finished school. She learned a lot more, but that has changed. But the white right wing, if I can put it that way, are still determined to deny this history. So that's really where me and my group of this group that's come together to try and say Britain has got to acknowledge, apologize, and pay, because that's the way we get peace and reconciliation. We're fighting a battle over history in Britain as well. But I mean,
so let me ask this, Alex. So did Britain though teach you as a student about U.S. involvement in slavery? You said you learned more about U.S. slavery.
So
were they pointing the finger at us?
Yeah, totally. So, well, I mean, a lot of slavery in the U.S. starts with British people bringing Africans to the U.S. before 1776, of course. So that is part of the British story. And I have ancestors who were tobacco planters in Virginia in the 18th century, who are part of this story, who were using African enslaved labor. But so that's part of it as well. But no, I mean, I did American history as a what we call an O-level, as a 16 years old exam, and and so I was taught about the Civil War. I was taught about Harriet Beecher Stowe. I was taught about about the South, and the war over slavery, if you like. What I wasn't taught about is that Britain enslaved 3.1 million African people and their descendants. I was taught that we abolished it, and led the rest of the world in abolishing it. And that's not even true either, because some American states abolished slavery in the North long before Britain did.
Let me ask you this. So your book, Blood Legacy, Reckoning with a Family's History of Slavery, I mean, how did your family, because you said Britons have a way of, being deferential to their ancestors. So your mom was not going to challenge your grandfather, but now you're writing a book that literally says you're reckoning with your family's history of slavery. How did this book go over with the family?
Well, not great. No, I mean, nobody wanted to hear this stuff. It destroyed a myth on which we'd all grown up. We've got a big family, but I think 90% of my sort of larger cousins and all of that have accepted that it was the right thing to do, and we were living a dishonest history. There's one or two who will not speak to me again.
Wow.
Some of the oldest, because I think they've just found it too painful, and also they think, and that's hard. But what was for me interesting is going to the Caribbean particularly, and talking to people who'd live on the plantations where we enslaved people, who live on that land, and are telling them, talking to them about it was that, their pleasure there at seeing someone with my skin and my history saying, I'm sorry for this, and we agree, acknowledge it happened. That made it seem more worthwhile. And what, of course, also some of my family are doing is trying to give some money in various ways through educational foundations and so on.
Yeah, I'm reading, look, again, your article is so fascinating. Here's another passage from it. Looking at my own family's history, you see just how wide the economic reach of their business was. Every year they shipped out basic British manufactured goods, from salted herring and beef to cloth woven in the east of Scotland, to feed and clothe the enslaved Africans and the hired Scotsmen who ran their plantations. Ooh, Alice, you put the family on blast with this this article, this book. And one of the things that I think is so refreshing is that you're just being honest about the economic benefits. I was just trying to explain to a woman today, she's from Serbia. She wasn't familiar with the concept of generational wealth. As I shared with you before the show started, I'm involved in a reparations case here in California, trying to help families who were dispossessed from their land, predominantly Black, some Latino, that happened in the 50s and 60s in Palm Springs, California. And one of the things that was lost by those families was the opportunity to build generational wealth. And so here in the U.S. now, the generational wealth between Black and white families is 10 to 1. White folks have 10% more wealth than African Americans. And I was trying to explain to her how they were able to build this wealth. And this is what your article, this is what your book, this is what your work talks about, is that you had this economy where white slave owners were profiting, and then they were able to pass down their profits, these businesses, generationally, generation to generation. Yes. And when slaves were freed, I don't know what happened in Britain, but in the U.S., there was a promise of 40 acres and a mule that never happened. So slaves were just free and they had nothing. And, you're trying to start something from zero versus starting something from, generations of wealth that's been passed down to you. It's really, that's the crux of the story.
That is, I think, and the point about this is, as a friend of mine who has that heritage says, the slavery story is not over in Britain or the Caribbean or indeed in the US, because it's still affecting people's lives. And I'm not wealthy in any way because of directly from the enslavement of African people, but it's not that many. I have a privilege. To British people, I come over like a privileged upper class white man, which is what I am. And that privilege, and all the benefits that brings, the networks, the people want to give me jobs because of how I sound and how I look, that comes from the wealth that my ancestors had back, in the 19th century. It's completely clear to me that's true. And
you make this point. Let me say this in your article. You make the point that it doesn't have to be a direct, dotted line, from slavery to your wealth, because you said the men who helped found the Manchester Guardian, for the most part, made their fortunes not from slave ownership, but from manufacturing with slave-grown cotton. So that makes those people behind those institutions no less culpable. So it doesn't have to be a dotted line, a straight line, for there to be clear benefit, like this Manchester Guardian, who is benefiting from manufacturing with slave-grown cotton. I think that's such an interesting point that you make.
And that's, of course, cotton grown by slaves in America. I mean, that we imported all our cotton from the States. Not the Caribbean was growing sugar. So the British colonies, in our countries, were growing sugar. But the most important thing of all is that I can look at. I mean, the brilliant thing about keeping my ancestors' records, which my grandfather did, is I can see their accounts books, all their letters, their journals, and so on. And by the 1800s, when income tax starts, they were paying more in money to the British government of taxation on their slavery businesses, everything from per head through to shipping in the food and the clothing, than they ever made in profit. And that makes the whole nation complicit, because that money fueled the rise of Britain's empire. So it's not, of course, the tentacles of slavery's wealth reach everywhere, but the key beneficiary was the British state. And it's really because Britain's slavery was industrialized, legal, and entirely racist. You could not enslave a white person. So, and these are the things that matter today, I think.
Absolutely. When we come forward, Alex, I want to talk about what do you do now that you have acquired all of this knowledge? I want to talk about the role of the royal family. That coronation is about to happen on Saturday. And they are not without fault in this entire equation as we talk about the growth and the benefits of individuals in Great Britain and obviously here in the U.S. as well. Stay with us, KBLA Talk 1580.
Areva time is the right time. More of Areva Martin in real time when we come forward.
I'm Julius White. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. 4 people, including a suspected shooter, are dead after 2 incidents in Georgia. According to the Colquitt County coroner, 3 women and a man died in Moultrie. The coroner said the alleged gunman killed himself. Meantime, the National Weather Service says there was another tornado in Los Angeles, California this morning. The Weather Service says an EF0 tornado reached 75 miles an hour and briefly touched down near Carson and Compton at 8:45 a.m. with minor damage to buildings, cars, and trees. And Attorney General Merrick Garland says the conviction of 4 Proud Boys members on seditious conspiracy shows the Department of Justice will do everything in its power to defend democracy.
We have secured the convictions of defendants who fought, punched, tackled, and even tased police officers who were defending the Capitol that day.
I'm Julius White on your home for 24/7 News, the Black Information Network, and BINnews.com.
A little bit of good news downtown LA on the 10 eastbound before Alameda Street. That earlier accident has cleared. In Monterey Park at 10 eastbound before New Avenue. Still got that wreck blocking the fast track and the 2 left lanes. It is stopped from Eastern Avenue. In Long Beach, 91 westbound before Cherry Avenue. New accident. This is blocking the left lane. And in Irvine, 405 northbound before Jeffrey Road. Got that disabled vehicle in the center lane.
Bank of America has powerful digital solutions for local and global businesses, so you can make every move matter. Visit bankofamerica.com/banking for business to learn more. Bank of America, N.A. Copyright 2023.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
Earlier today, we told you the number one issue heading into tonight's Lakers-Golden State game is how Golden State will handle Anthony Davis. Number 2 on the list is playing time for LeBron and AD. AD played 44 minutes in Game 1. LeBron played 40. The attorney generals in the state of New York and California are investigating the NFL after lawsuits were filed by more than 30 former female employees. The employees are accusing the NFL of sexual harassment and workplace discrimination. Letitia James is the New York Attorney General. Rob Bonta represents California. The NFL has an office in Inglewood adjacent to SoFi Stadium. In a statement, Bontis said he has serious concerns about the NFL's role in creating an extremely hostile and detrimental work environment. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
We begin top story with late breaking news.
Is it going to succeed, yes or no?
I think it's going to succeed. It's going to succeed.
Can you believe it?
Y'all did it!
KBLA Talk 1580 is about to celebrate its second anniversary on Juneteenth, and no terrible twos around here. We couldn't be more excited about all the good news we'll be announcing soon, including the launch of some new shows to keep giving you more of what you've been looking for.
Come on!
Smart radio for smart people. Hey, it's our celebration, but you get all the gifts. We'll be giving away fresh merch, swag bags, and a chance for you to join the private invitation-only, star-studded music and dance till you drop, food and drink galore second anniversary celebration. To stay in the know about the second anniversary details, download the KBLA Talk 1580 app right now. Don't miss out on your chance to be a winner. At KBLA Talk 1580, when we come forward, we're bringing everybody with us.
Happy anniversary, KBLA!
KBLA Talk 1580 would like to thank all of the businesses that tune into KBLA at work. We celebrate you, your calls to the station, and your overall support. To show our appreciation, we would like to treat your office to a lunch for 10, brought to you by the Original Taco Pete's. Open the KBLA Talk 1580 app or log on to KBLA1580.com to submit your office to be selected for our Office of the Week. We know you're just like our staff, putting in many hard, smart working hours per week. We just want to say thank you, and we appreciate you. You and your staff deserve lunch on us. Enter your office to win lunch for 10 and be highlighted on KBLA Talk 1580 as our Office of the Week. Open the KBLA app or log on to KBLA 1580 to enter your office today to become the KBLA Talk 1580 Office of the Week, sponsored by the Original Taco Pete's, a black-owned restaurant. Become the KBLA Talk 1580 Office of the Week. This has been a KBLA Talk 1580 community call to action.
The possibility of lung cancer can be pretty scary, especially if you're one of approximately 8 million current or former smokers at high risk. That's why SaveByTheScan.org wants you to know that now there's a breakthrough low-dose CT scan that can detect lung cancer early, and it only takes 60 seconds. You stop smoking, now start screening. For an easy quiz to see if you're eligible, visit SaveByTheScan.org. It could save your life. SaveByTheScan.org is brought to you by the American Lung Association's Lung Force Initiative and the Ad Council.
This is KBLA Talk 1580. Talk radio. That's music to your ears. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. You're listening to Areva Martin in real time on KBLA Talk 1580.
I am back with Alex Renton. He is a journalist and an author of multiple books, including Blood Legacy, Reckoning with the Family's History of Slavery. He's written a provocative article for The Guardian, basically challenging folks who are in the UK who have benefited from the transatlantic slave trade to do something about it. So, okay, Alex, you have discovered this information. You've done research about your family's involvement in slavery. You learned that your grandfather at one point maybe owned as many as 900 slaves. What do you want people to do with this information?
I think, well, so I think the first thing is listen. That's what people, other people come forward who have similar histories and ask me that. And I say, have you asked people around you who are of color or friends who are of African and Caribbean origin what they think you should do? And actually, you might surprise people a lot if you start, I'm going to start hearing what you think is wrong and what you think I can do to put it right. And that's what this group of us in the UK are trying to do. So I went to the site to Jamaica and to Tobago, the site of the places where my great-great-grandfathers enslaved people. And I said, what do you think? What does it mean to you today? And what would you like? And it's because there's a lot of talk in the Caribbean about national reparations from Britain and the other European countries that enslaved people. And the interesting thing to me is the first thing people said to me was apology. Apology would be nice. Literally, I had that said to me on the site where my ancestors murdered African people. And everyone went, yeah, money would be good. We're poor. Why is it fair that we made you rich, but we stay poorer than you? That seems a good question. But it starts with acknowledgement and apology. And the British state has never said sorry for enslaving 3.1 million African people and their descendants. And
your article, again, here's a brilliant paragraph. Britain has apologized for its part in the Irish famine of the 1840s, for the murder of civilians in Kenya in the 1950s. Why not for this great crime against humanity? Apology has power. Those who mock proposals for reparation and reconciliation with West Africa and the Caribbean fear it. It's a powerful statement. So what do the Brits say as to why they won't apologize for that 3.1 million people, but they've issued apologies for these other atrocities?
Well, that's very interesting because, I mean, we've all thought the royal family might apologize for their part in it. We've all thought that various prime ministers, Tony Blair on a visit to the Caribbean, everyone thought he was going to say it, but he didn't. And, the cynical view is that Britain is the government lawyers are frightened that if you apologize for something, you lay yourself open to reparation claims, to financial compensation claims. And I'm afraid it may be something as low as that.
So let's talk about the royal family. Royal family, my goodness. It's so funny because I was given an award last year, and with the award, they gave a lot of gifts. And one of the gifts was a plate that was signed by the Queen, framed, beautiful plate. And I was decorating my office, and someone was helping me, and she saw the plate, and she was so impressed with it, so enthralled with it, she wanted to hang it on my wall. And I said, no, absolutely not. I said, the Queen is a colonizer. And she's like, what's that? And I had to explain to her how we use the term colonizer in the US. And I said, that gift, I don't quite know what to do with it. I'm not going to hang it on my wall. And she asked me just recently, like, that was really, that resonated with her. But I don't think many people, we get this idealized, glamorized narrative about the Queen and the royal family, and somehow they get separated from what you're describing as the enslavement of those 3.1 million people. So talk to us about what role they have played throughout history.
Okay, so I mean that it's very clear in British history just how involved the royal family were. Back to King Charles II who died in 1646. The first company that traded Africans between Africa and the Caribbean and the Americas was called the Royal African Company. And that's because it had royal patronage and royal shareholders. And it's clear that right through the whole slavery period, the members of the royal family were investors and beneficiaries in this industrialized slavery. So they just reflect Britain as a whole, that, really literally hundreds of thousands of people who are alive today had their ancestors involved in that. What are the royal family going to do? One of the things, I think in America, you think we're all in love with them and they can do no wrong. I'm not one of those people, and quite a lot of us don't think that. We think they're highly privileged, and we're not sure they use their power very well. You look at the Meghan Markle and Harry story, we're all disgusted by what's happened through that and the racism that's behind that as well. But so they are very rich. King Charles himself is worth £1.8 billion, we were told by the newspapers last week. He pays no tax. The British state allows him not to pay any tax. I'm not really sure, given this history of continuing poverty and inequality among the descendants of enslaved people in Britain itself, not just the Caribbean, why some of his money doesn't go to support them and give them better futures. Do you expect Charles to be more liberal on this issue than his mother was? Yeah. Frankly, if he wants to stay in power, 10% of the population of Britain are of colour, and many of them, almost everyone who has African and Caribbean heritage is descended from enslaved people. I think it would be a pretty popular thing to do. No, I really do.
But it would have been popular for the Queen to do, and she didn't do it. So I'm just saying, what makes you more optimistic about Charles, him stepping up, since you just said one of the issues that the lawyers have advised the government about is if you apologize, you're opening yourself up to claims for cash, restitution, and other kinds of reparations. Yeah. I would imagine Charles is getting the same legal advice, right?
Well, he's not a nation. I mean, in this, he's an individual, and I'm not sure the descendants of the enslaved could legally sue an individual for what their great-great-grandfathers did. But I think the reason why I'm sure he will do something. He's announced an inquiry into the history of his family and slavery, as though we didn't know it already. The reason he'll do it is the royal family is not, it's a great day for them on Saturday, but they're on a down at the moment. People don't love him as they did the Queen. He has to do something new to make the family relevant to 21st century Britain.
You are the co-founder of something called Heirs of Slavery, Alice. What is that?
So it's a group of us who have this history, that our ancestors were part of the structures and the wealth of British industrial slavery, and who have acknowledged that it's true and that it's relevant today. Because I think one of the things that many people of African and Caribbean origin have said to us, over the years is, why don't you come out and support us in our claims for restitution and against racism? That's what we need, your influence. So we were kind of going, it's all very well giving, a few pounds donations to charities and educational foundations, and we all do that. What could be much more useful is your voices in support of these movements, and that's why we've come forward. And we think that many other British people in our position, that's wealthy upper class Brits or wealthy British people, will join in. We're having an amazing reaction already.
How large is the group currently?
Well, we selected 8 people because we wanted to keep it tight. And now we have a website, heirsofslavery.org. People can go and comment and tell us what they think we should do and join up. And I think, we'll hold events later in the year where I think we'll be able to say that many more have come forward. And the interesting thing, Areva, is that we're hearing a lot from France, from Portugal. We're hearing from, France, of course. Haiti was their slavery colony. And immense damage done there. So this I hope could become a Europe-wide movement.
Well, when we come forward, I want to ask you the big question that all of my listeners want to know is, where's America in this? And have they come forward? And how might the heirs of slavery and the movement that you've started in Britain, might it take hold in the United States? I also want to talk about what you learned from your listening to those descendants of enslaved people. Stay with us. KBLA Talk 1580.
She's the real deal in real time. You're listening to Areva Martin in real time on KBLA Talk 1580.
Tens of thousands of families across the United States are grieving over loved ones who've taken their own lives. Maisha Cairo here with your K-Black Minute News, brought to you by Lendistry. Story courtesy of CaliforniaBlackMedia.org. Men outnumbering women 4-1 as states across the country, including California, report alarming suicide rates each year. Among Black Americans, suicide is having a unique impact on Black men. The suicide rate for Black people in California rose by 31.1% between 2010 and 2019, a substantial increase when compared to other ethnic groups. For suicide prevention resources, visit focus.senate.ca.gov/mental health/suicide.
Thanks to our new sponsor, Lendistry. Lendistry is a national Black-led small business lender that is headquartered in Los Angeles. Lendistry helps small business owners access the affordable capital needed to grow. Visit Lendistry, LENDISTRY.com/KBLA today.
KBLA Talk 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, Maisha Cairo here, KBLA, live at Chase Bank on Crenshaw and Vernon for the In This Together tour with female business owners, a day of empowerment, community panels, and best of all, tips on building business from marketing to capital. I was able to speak with one of the panelists, the owner of Kids Love. Take a listen.
So Kids Love, KIDSLUV, is a first-to-market zero-sugar, vitamin-enhanced functional beverage for kids.
So the zero sugar is really important because if not, the sugar gets on the teeth, it can cause cavities. So as a mom, I love this vitamins and hydration in one. Tell us what's happening here with Chase Bank today.
So I would say, I think what Chase is trying to do is create a community actually for entrepreneurs, a place where people can go. They have the space to do it. It's a beautiful space, and to be able to have these conversations. There are so many benefits to being a women-owned and certified business, from a standpoint of getting into stores, not paying the slotting fees of what it takes to be in stores. So I think Chase is trying to bring awareness to a lot of the things that people just don't know about, that not only the bank can help, but outside of the bank, their relationships can help create.
That's beautiful. And I know, this is how we build equity in communities of color, is kind of spreading that information and that knowledge. So thank you for being here today and doing your part and letting these women know that it is possible. For KBLA 1580, I'm Maisha Cairo in the community with Chase.
Mom's early Alzheimer's diagnosis was hard to take.
And when I left the Evanon, we decided together that it was time to see a doctor and make a plan.
Early detection gave us more time to seek out information and support as a family.
If you or your family are noticing changes, it could be Alzheimer's. Talk about seeing a doctor together. For more information, visit alz.org/time to talk. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
There's no time like the present. Let's get back to more of Areva Martin in real time on KBLA Talk 1580.
All right, Alex, we've been talking about your group, Heirs of Slavery. You said it just, came together, about 8 of you who are working on this issue of reparations, and other countries were starting to take notice of what you were doing. You mentioned France and Portugal. So my question is the U.S. So I don't know if you're familiar with H.R. 40, but it is a study bill that is now stuck in the U.S. Congress. And actually, it's just a bill that would study the U.S.'s involvement in reparations. The state of California has gone further. It actually has a reparations task force that's been going around the state, and they're going to issue a report by July 1st that makes recommendations for reparations for African Americans or descendants of slaves in California. But has the U.S. weighed in at all in the work that you're doing?
We've had a lot of media interest from the US. I mean, there's you guys and CBS did a morning piece on their morning show the other day, which kind of surprised us. I mean, I think because in Britain, we kind of see it as different. The reparations debate in Britain is largely driven by the Caribbean nations. So CARICOM, the Organization of Caribbean Nations, made a request for a 10-point reparation plan to be discussed back in 2014. And, the Dutch government and the Danish government are doing that. But the British government always just said, get out of here. We're not going to talk about this, get over it. So we get driven by that. Now, I did know about Kamala Harris, that it's one of her issues, reparations, and that it is in the mainstream dialogue in the States. And that seemed very healthy to me because it's not in the mainstream dialogue of politicians in Britain at all. It's absolutely sidelined. It's a few MPs who are of African and Caribbean origin, members of parliament, to, take it up. But it's kind of interesting, the differences. I think something that a lot of people don't understand, including, people in Britain, is just how savage sugar plantation slavery was in the Caribbean. The average lifespan of an adult African arriving there was only 4 years. Wow. And I can see because this is to do with the climate and the way sugar planting works. And I know, obviously, plantation life in the all over the Americas would have been unthinkably awful and cruel. But the sheer waste of human lives and the fact that my ancestors and all those other slave owners thought it was cheaper to work a slave to death and buy a new African person from Africa than look after them properly. And I don't want to go into too much detail here. I mean, it is all in my book, but I can see that my ancestors, who were Christians, who considered themselves honorable people, treated the African people like farm animals. I mean, not least in using the young women to breed more. And it was a very, very, very cruel form of slavery, sugar plantation work. And
do
I
you
think
know how many people died on
does,
those? I'm sorry. Do you know how many people died on those plantations?
Yeah. Yes. Well, I mean, so the key statistic is, so Britain shipped 3 million people to the Caribbean over those years, but at the end of slavery, and this is 200 years, but at the end of the slavery, there are only 700,000 African origin people left in the Caribbean. So it shows that even though they were all obviously having children and encouraged to have children because the children were sold and valuable to the owners, the death toll was such that the population just declined all the time. And on my own family, I can see from my, very meticulously kept accountancy records of my ancestors and their workers, up 20% would die in 1 year often of the 200 they had at any one time. It was, I say this because people, particularly white people in my country, tend to go, was it so bad on a plantation? Maybe it was better than being in Africa. And you go, guys, it's not just that you didn't own your own baby, and it could be taken from you. It was a death sentence and utterly, utterly evil. So the reparations talk in Britain is all about it's not about, as I noticed in the States, more about the inequality and the crimes against Black people in the modern age. It's about what happened back then and how that's left people traumatized to this day.
That's very much the conversation. That's very much a part of the debate in the U.S. is the vestiges, the overwhelming impact that slavery had on African Americans, the impact that's still felt to this day. Yes. We are still dealing with the trauma, and there's all these reports that have come out from psychologists and psychiatrists to talk about how we still carry trauma today from our ancestors who were enslaved. There are still very much, we're still feeling the impact.
I get that, Areva. Inherited trauma, and that research is really interesting, isn't it? But can I say, as you, as an African American, do you feel you have been apologized to? Because what I'm hearing is people don't think the apology and acknowledgement have happened in a way that could be healing.
No, I don't think America has atoned to its original sin of slavery. And if anything, at this juncture in our country, their efforts, as I said, to whitewash slavery. You just said, someone said to you, well, maybe being on the plantation wasn't that bad. Maybe it was like better than being in Africa. We have people in the U.S. who say things, really try to twist and distort the facts to suggest that slaves were immigrants, that they, somehow were voluntary immigrants who came to this country looking for something better. So people if anything, if we are very much, this country has a very twisted and distorted history with the truth about how brutal, as you just described, the brutality of slavery, the rape, the sexual assault. There's so many violent acts that were associated with the, just the concept of your body, like you said, your babies, your agency, everything being owned by someone. And we have not reckoned with that in this country. And that's why I want to ask you briefly before we run out of time. You said you were listening to the descendants of enslaved people. What are they telling you beyond an apology? What do they want? Because the California Reparations Task Force, we know they're going to put forth a proposal that involves an apology. Absolutely. It's going to involve that acknowledgement, but it's also going to involve trying to address these huge economic disparities. I talked about that Black-white wealth gap. Is that what you hear when you talk to descendants of enslaved people in Britain?
Yes, in Britain and in the Caribbean as well, in the countries where my family was involved. It's perfectly clear. You can't argue with the statement that you raped and murdered my ancestors to become rich. How is it fair that 200 years later you're still so much richer, and that the very economic system, the social system, keeps me poor and keeps you rich? And you have to go, I hear you. And that has to be addressed. But I think one of the things as heirs of slavery, we want to do is help people like us listen and learn. And one of the things when I did ask people people that I talked to in the Caribbean, whether they were farmers working on the plantations we used to own or politicians and journalists and so on, is, everyone's, of course, we can be better nations together. We can have better relationships. We can reconcile if you address these issues, apology and the economics of it. And for me, that's inspiring. It's about living more happily together with people who we have a lot in common. I mean, my ancestors' DNA is all over the Caribbean, I have to say. So these are my brothers, and this needs acknowledging. But I mean,
it's a good point. Where do you go from here? I mean, like you said, you've gotten national attention in the U.S. Media has, obviously, the story is fascinating. I think it is so fascinating to us in the U.S. because there's so many parallels to what we're going through in this country at this moment. I think that's what's driving the interest. But what do you hope happens in the Caribbean and in Britain as a result of not only your work and your advocacy, but now this new group?
For the Caribbean, I think we're very much throwing our group's sort of lobbying, advocacy ability behind the CARICOM plan, the 10-point reparations plan for the Caribbean nations. In Britain, that doesn't address Britain, or it doesn't address West Africa as well, which also has a claim because of the economic damage done by removing 14 million people by force from them. In Britain, it's much more about addressing systemic racism and the educational deficits between, which are color-based and those things. And I think I don't see what we want to do as a group is support existing groups of African Caribbean people in Britain who are campaigning on that and trying to lend our energy to supporting that. What do I hope will happen? I think within 5 years, Britain will have apologized, started to acknowledge, and started, led by King Charles, and started to try and change the consequences of this. You can't change the history, but you can still change the consequences.
Very well said. Thank you so much, Alex, for sitting down with me. Thank you for the great work that you're doing. Thank you for that really insightful opinion piece that you wrote in The Guardian. Again, Alex is a journalist and he's an author. He has a very fascinating book out called Blood Legacy, Reckoning with the Family's History of Slavery. Good luck to you and the heirs of slavery, the new group, the new lobbying group that you've just launched. Good luck to you in this work. And I hope you are right that in 5 years we will see an apology and we will see the royal family also get engaged in repairing the harm that was done by transatlantic slavery, slavery in the Caribbean, slavery in Great Britain. Again, my best to you. The next voice that you hear will be Robin Ayers and the Raw Report right here on KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Julius White. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. The man accused in Wednesday's mass shooting in Atlanta, Georgia is facing 5 charges. 24-year-old African-American